Hello, you're listening to Me and Paranormal You with your host, Ryan Singer. Because it's more fun to believe. Hey, everybody. Thank you for listening to another experience of Me and Paranormal You. This is your buddy, Ryan Singer. If you've never listened to this program before, what a damn fine day to give it a shot. We've got Joshua Sean here from, oh my God. I mean, the world that is ITC, right? The the magic that is instrumental transcommunication, zero G ITC. You can find that channel on YouTube. You can find it on Facebook. There is, first of all, thanks for doing the show.
Thank you. It's my honor. I'm humbled.
So
really,
excited that, our mutual friend, Matt Jackson, made this happen. And gosh, I mean, I have to thank Darcy Staniforth for connecting me to Matt Jackson. I mean, the list goes on and on from like where this, reverse engineered where this has even happened. I'm so excited because first of all, you do something wild, and I love this. And I'm realizing that you do this. You do like a 6-hour live stream ITC session for people, essentially. It looks like. Am I mistaken in that?
You've described it accurately and perfectly. I run essentially 2 sessions. You're perfect with your words. I run an off-camera session where I run the equipment and allow people to be their own operator. And then I do run a show where I'm on camera for those who might want guidance or a little more education on the background of ITC. I try and include during live sessions.
Oh my God. And if there's an area on this program, 730 episodes, 10 plus years, that has been, I guess, grossly neglected as far as historical context and information, it is the history of ITC. And so I'm excited today to maybe pick your brain a little bit. And because when it comes to investigations and, techniques and styles and experiments, I'm a woo-woo wild one. I love it all. Right.
Yeah.
And, and inside the world of ITC, I know there's different camps, and I know there's, like, oh no, you shouldn't be doing that camp, or, oh, that doesn't really count camp. You know what I mean? Like, we don't need to worry about that part necessarily, about
Sure.
about the drama,
Yeah.
the ITC
Sure.
drama.
Sure.
But I think, and now I'm trying to use my intuition here, but I think, explain to me zero G ITC, because it's in the name, because it's the name, it's zero gain, right?
Correct. You've done your homework. I'm impressed. Wow. Most people don't realize that. And in fact, a lot of the people do what I did initially, is find the play on words. And you think of zero gravity or zero G or something in outer space or what is this type of ITC that doesn't employ gravity? What's going on here?
Yeah. How cool would that be? So we're floating around with a radio?
Right. And hopefully one day we are. Who knows where humanity will be in the coming years. But essentially, it derived from zero gain technology, particularly zero gain amplification and zero gain antenna technology, or the theory of, because they're principles in theory. They're not necessarily put into practice because there's really no such thing as an antenna with no gain or no direction. But it's the technology or theory behind that, where essentially the communication or the voices that we're hearing are populated effortlessly. Let me try that again. Effortlessly. Let's break this down, Josh. Effortlessly.
Is that one of your words? Is effortlessly one of your words? I've got it like 4 words that I just can't say.
I think it is today. I'm going to add it to the list. I do have a lot of words, but this is a new one.
I'm sorry is one that I can never say. I've been told I have a hard time with.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's a whole separate discussion.
Yeah, it's a whole. So it's in theory more than in practice. And
correct.
let's give people a little bit of background, because you come to this and you've been doing it for a while.
Correct. Yes.
And you know, Matthew cannot shut up about the, essentially you are Oz behind the ITC curtain when Matt is talking about you. And so I want to get into,
Wow.
let's just give people a little bit of background about,
Thank you.
where you're coming from on all this.
Sure. I appreciate the compliments, Matthew. If you're listening, my friend, thank you. I'm sure that's very subjective because we're friends. So I don't know how objectively true that is, but thank you for the compliment. But essentially, what I'm trying to do is bring some of this theory to practice the best I can while combining the imagination, because this field requires an imaginative process. It requires us to use our imagination and apply theories that might still just be theories, but try and put that into practice the best we can. So, for example, if there's no such thing as a perfectly zero gain antenna, well, you know, what type of minimal gain can we use? How far can we push it? And then how can these voices populate through this type of technology? And then we have to amplify them or bring them up through gain staging. So I bring a lot of that audio practice to this field, and it also requires an imaginative process. And there are a lot of people in this field with wild imaginations.
For sure. And it's so funny. I was just reading the Einstein quote about imagination today. I'm going to bring it up while I'm talking, because I was looking for a quote about something else. And it's Einstein quote on imagination. It's a very famous. Do you know what I'm talking? Do you know the one I'm talking about?
I do, not off the top of my head, but I am familiar
Okay.
with
It's
the quote. Yeah.
Yeah, here's the quote alleged. It's attributed to Einstein.
Right.
Imagination is more important than knowledge. Imagination is the language of the soul. Pay attention to your imagination and you will discover all you need to be fulfilled. So that really resonated with me this afternoon, when I was researching something else, and it didn't,
Yeah.
it wasn't applicable at all to what I needed, but I just sat there and ruminated on it for a while. So it's interesting that this is coming full circle for me today, talking about
Yeah.
the imagination. And I believe imagination is such a critical part of everything we do, especially when you're kind of putting your neck out there into a world of the woo woo or the strange
Right.
or the weird, right?
Absolutely well stated. And it surprised me how many audio engineers are in the field that I've come across that have heard about instrumental transcommunication or witnessed it themselves. Let's say they're recording a band in the studio and they're rolling to tape. Even in 2024, some people still roll to tape. And they're still picking up these voices. They're hearing these voices, but maybe they're not aware of the ITC community or the fact that it's a field of study, but they're witnessing this decades after decades. And they're going, oh, yeah, those voices, we just get used to them. I had one audio engineer say, we just get used to them.
Wow.
But they were aware of them. So it's amazing how many audio engineers now that I've talked to that I've brought into the field because of their wild imaginations or because of their knowledge with this. And now they're designing or developing or bringing their skills to the table. So it really does tie back into imagination and really a knowledge of a particular topic. It doesn't have to be audio. There are people from all different walks of life and industries that are joining ITC.
That's really cool. And it reminds me of the story of the Lost Mars Volta album. Are you familiar with
Oh,
that?
of course. Mars Volta is a brilliant band, very talented musicians, of course.
And there was like a real, essentially like an ITC, like EVP situation happening on like one of their, or it was one of the, I forget what album it was they were recording, where crazy stuff just kept happening.
Right.
And then the album is gone. I don't know what, and then it just all disappeared or something off
Really?
tape. Or I wish it's been so long since it's been a decade since I got obsessed with that story, so I don't remember all the details. But anyway, that
Right.
is interesting because you're talking about people who are kind of like forced into the game almost because
Right.
of stumbling on the phenomena, what I would call, or what, not what I would call, but what have been called SPE, spontaneous paranormal experiences, where they're capturing EVPs, or they're
Mm-hmm.
they're communicating with, or they're hearing communication from something when they weren't looking for it and weren't expecting it.
Perfectly stated. And that happens to so many people. Once you bring up the topic, they go, oh, I had an experience one time. And you realize how many people have actually experienced electronic voice phenomena. Almost every audio engineer I've talked to has experienced something weird in the studio, or some voice is showing up, because they're taking advantage of literally millions of dollars of equipment that they can perfectly gain stage their voices and use to speak. I mean, they have the best equipment in the world, and these audio engineers are experiencing this. And like you said, they're being almost forced into these spontaneous events that it's just a part of their daily life now.
That's really cool. Can you explain a little bit for someone like me or someone else listening who doesn't quite understand what gain stage means?
Sure. Gain staging is a process by bringing up a signal with as little noise as possible. So you want to have a clear, transparent signal that has high dynamic range, which essentially means there's a low noise floor. For example, when you turn on your microphone and put your earphones on, you might hear a subtle low noise floor, like a subtle, maybe white or blue noise hiss, maybe coming from your preamps, things like that. The process of gain staging is bringing up that signal, whether through 1 point of amplification, 2 points, 3 points, depending on the signal, so that it's audible, it's clear, it reaches a proper loudness level without distortion, and it can be analyzed. So a lot of the times, signals, when I say gain staging, it's the process of bringing that signal to perfect clarity without hearing the noise floor.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm very familiar with that over the years too, using
Right.
like, bad microphones or just
Sure.
cheaper microphones or whatever, where you just need to blast them to get the volume right. And then you hear it. It's very fuzzy is what I would just call it.
Right.
Um, okay. That's interesting. And,
Right.
I've been out in the field with, Matthew more than a few times, and he's got
Mhm.
all the gadgets.
Yes, he does.
Um, you have been in this field for how long now?
My first experience with instrumental transcommunication unknowingly was when I was a toddler, using tape recorders, very much similar to this. This is a newer model. I don't know if you can see this,
Oh
but
yeah.
using actual analog tape recorders. I have another one here that uses the mini cassettes. I don't know if you could see this.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's
Now,
right.
now, when I was, I hope I'm not dating myself. Actually think I'm holding up tape cassette players. I am dating myself. But when I grew up, I had access to devices like these I would just play with. So if I was playing piano or just tapping on the floor, I'd turn on the recorder just for fun. And I kept these tapes. And over time, looking back in hindsight, I realized growing up, these voices were on these tapes. So basically, I was conducting or involved with instrumental transcommunication from age of a toddler, but didn't consciously start studying it and researching it with purpose until my teenage years, when I had access to studios and facilities where I could engage in these recording experiments.
Oh wow, that's cool. I
And
my first recorder for when I started doing stand-up comedy was a tape. It was a mini cassette
right.
recorder so I have all of these little mini tapes in a bin in
Yes.
a storage unit right now
Yes.
of all my earliest stand-up comedy sets, which
Oh,
should
that's
probably
fantastic.
never be listened to again
No,
for
hold
anyone
on to
who
those. No, no, those are great. That's so awesome. You have those. You have to hold on to those.
Yeah,
Those are so great.
so you were drawn to this just
Right.
instinctually.
Yes.
The recording of sound and the
Mhm.
playing with and the preservation almost of noise, and without realizing it, discover
Yeah.
other noises that weren't so prevalent to the naked ear. I guess, if that's even a phrase, the naked ear.
That is a phrase. And in fact, that's a good way that people understand what you're talking about, is saying the naked ear or hearing it raw by the naked ear. And it's interesting how so many of us, all of us growing up, if at any time you've used a recording device, by chance you have participated in a spontaneous event or electronic voice phenomena without knowing it. So it's not just me, it's all of us that at some point use this equipment. Who knows? If you go back, if you have those tapes, listen, you might hear things that previously weren't there or you weren't listening for. But I can say my conscious awareness of this subject happened. Now, get this. I had a friend in high school who interned at Sound City Studios here in the San Fernando Valley.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
Now he was interning. And when we had a chance to record a demo, it was 3 a.m. on like a Sunday. I mean, we had to go in for like an hour at a time, sneak in basically. But it was at this time when he came in and he said, you wouldn't believe the stuff I'm picking up. That's when I'm recording now to these tapes, because this was a new experience to him. And he started mentioning to me, I'm hearing these voices that aren't there. And even though we're using Neumann mics and had all this amazing equipment, there were still things that weren't supposed to be there in perfectly treated rooms that were perfectly treated for recording. And that's when it hit me. Oh, other people are experiencing this. That's when it clicked. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, some of my other bandmates didn't care, but that's when the conscious awareness that other people experienced this and that this phenomena was real happened in my mid-teens. And that's when everything started moving in this forward direction to where I am today.
Wow. And what a place
Right.
for, to sneak into. I mean, a famous
Truly.
recording studio.
Truly, my friend, and I'll say his first name, Aiden. I won't say his last name because there's lots of Aidens in the world. He said we were okay to be there. It kind of seemed like when we had to leave, it was like, make sure you clean up everything, take your shoes off. I was like, we're supposed to be here, right? He's like, yeah. Just, did you get everything?
Yeah. Like you pack in, pack out.
Right.
No, without a trace.
Right. So it was one of those experiences, but truly that's where, and then going to future studios from that point, talking to audio engineers and going, oh yeah, we pick up this stuff. So it was very common, but just, I don't know. I guess it was so common. They just lived with it to do their job. It is what it is.
Wow. And now I'm fascinated by this idea of just tracking down almost like, almost some kind of series or documentary where you track down all of the audio engineers and, you call it, the voice behind the voice or whatever we want to call it. And it's documentary about EVP specifically. And, just from specifically sound from recording studios.
Right.
And, cause it hasn't really occurred to me outside of like this old Mars Volta story where there was a ghost in the machine or something like that, to think that like, oh my God, yeah, this is the best equipment in the world.
Right.
It makes sense that it could be prevalent there.
You would be amazed because these studios, depending on your belief of ITC or how this works, a lot of emotion is expressed at a studio. People are pouring their heart and souls into projects, sometimes arguing. Bandmates argue. Technicians, audio engineers argue. There's always emotion at these places. So there seems to be a very high probability for this communication to proliferate. And what's also interesting, a lot of these studios have a very deep history, at least here in LA where I am. So there's almost this perfect storm of energy to create an environment for this communication to happen.
Yeah. And I guess there's a bunch of different schools of thought about where phenomena might originate from. And from what I can gather, I don't know if it's a fair assessment or not, you're open-minded about, I have no idea. We don't know enough yet to know exactly. It could be anywhere and anything.
The quote I use that I love, it came from one of the frontmen or lyricists in my bands. It wasn't a song we did, but I apply it to this field of study. One of the lines in the verse says, "The only thing I know is I know nothing. The only thing I know is I know nothing." Now, I'm a positive person, but that is a reality check, because at every stage of my life of going through this research, whether I have success or failures in my designs, I still wind up saying that very same quote to myself is the only thing I know is I know nothing, because sometimes I get communication from things I wasn't expecting, and then vice versa. There's still so much of an unknown to this. And so that is definitely my motto. I say it positively, but I keep myself in check with that. Especially, you have to in this field.
I mean, can you imagine walking around thinking you know everything in this field?
Right.
I mean, that would be, I mean, I don't know. I hesitate to use negative terminology here, but that would be a level of delusion that
Sure.
I could only hope to achieve someday, and like self-confidence. Like, can you imagine having that
Right.
much self-confidence in yourself?
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why for many decades I was doing this research privately or with friends, and more recently I've gone public, was just because I felt ITC needed to be represented with that type of credibility and transparency to say, there's someone that's going to get live on camera. I'm going to conduct a session. I'm not only going to say the only thing I know is I know nothing, but I'm going to do live ITC sessions. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not good. Sometimes we don't get anything, sometimes we get a lot. But that's really how I conduct my shows, is from that standpoint, is not only do I not know everything, I'm just going to show you what I do know, and then you be the judge. Ultimately, if you hear something or not, it's subjective. That's your subjective perception. So I can only present the audio or the evidence or the method by which we study this, and then the person who's witnessing it will judge for themselves what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, you have a very analytical approach, and it's grounded in the, I guess, the science of the devices, and
True.
or in just the, I guess, the mechanics of the tools, right?
Yes, there is an objective. There's a point of analyzing these devices from a very objective standpoint to make sure that I'm maximizing signal to noise ratio, or I'm providing the right order of harmonics for the communication to proliferate. But there's also the subjective side that we're researching that I can't control, is even if I feel the device works well for me, or it's met the checklist of what I need to provide for them to use to communicate, it still may not work for someone else, or there may be other variables at play. So there's definitely an objective and subjective side to instrumental transcommunication. And it's important to keep that in mind when either researching this or just passively watching instrumental transcommunication sessions.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's what we talked about earlier. That's the,
Right.
you're checking both boxes of imagination and knowledge, and it's the science,
Trying to, yeah.
and yeah, and well, let's do a quick break here. Let's.
Sure.
This is an opportunity for me to remind people that you can get these fascinating conversations with no commercials over at patreon.com/Ryan Singer, $3 a month. Thank you to the patrons. God, we love you at this show. And by we, I mean me and all of the different characters that come out of my mouth sometimes. So, Todd wants to say hi to everybody. Diner Dan also says hello. He needs more pancakes at 2 a.m. So sign up on the Patreon page. And we're going to be right back with Joshua Sean of Zero GITC. I mean, I've got 1,000 more questions. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And we're back. Wow. Okay. So at the end of the day, there are skeptics in the field of the paranormal who are driven by, I'm not exactly sure what their driving force is. I can't speak for them, but I mean, I'm talking about like a hardcore skeptically minded person, a materialist, and yet they continue for years and years doing paranormal investigations. And you are not that person, from what I can tell. And even though we're just meeting here tonight, the most, I don't want to be like, give me the most profound ITC experience you had, but obviously they started happening when you were young. And was it a question of what is all of this that drives you? And because it keeps happening over and over and over again? So I'm talking about maybe quantity over quality, I guess, if we want to try to, give a duality description here. Or was there a big bang moment, or was there just like, wow, this just keeps happening and other people I know are referencing it? There's two. And so it starts to build this huge mountain of evidence of the unknown for you.
This, I like the analogy you used. This ramped up progressively for me as I entered this into my teens with more purpose and looking into this research, and then moving into my 20s with my more formal studies. I did have a moment that absolutely changed my mind. And it was right around the time we were doing a demo, or I was working with the intern at Sound City Studios. I was laying in bed, and this was through my teens. A lot of people report activity in their teens, but that's a separate discussion. I was hearing more chatter and communication when I was going to sleep, laying down with, and again, this was before phones or any type of distractions or a lot of, the internet wasn't hooked up, things like this. This was an analog world. So there was not a lot that could conduct this. No TV in my bedroom. I started hearing this chatter that I'm hearing now with my research. So I'm going to jump to, I felt I was shown a preview of what I would later be working on at an early age in my life. So I would go to bed at night. This was going on for years, and I would hear talking by 25, 50 people just talking, and then calling my name and then talking. And I was like, what is this? Like, very analytically, what is going on? I'm hearing this. I'm hearing this. But I was hearing their conversations amongst themselves, with them very occasionally addressing me or what was going on. And it stopped after a while. I went to college, moved on with my life, whatever. And then now today, I'm working with these devices that at the beginning was creating that same chatter. And literally, as one of the devices I'm working on created that type of chatter, and I started to recognize it, I went, oh my gosh, this is what I experienced as a teen for many years. And I don't know if it was a preview to what I'd be working on, but that was the moment where that changed my life, is hearing those voices and feeling a comfort with them, not being scared of them. And now today I'm literally working with those same voices.
Wow, I've never heard of this. You were using the world's very first ITC device, the human body.
That is a point that I wanted to address with you, but there are many, many, many people walking this planet right now that don't need the devices that I'm working on. They're already aligned or in tune with this communication. And although I had an experience for a few years with that, and it didn't return for many years, maybe because of distractions or pressure with school or trying to get a job and things like this. But I'll never forget that. But there are people that have that ability, and I got a taste of it for whatever reason. But yeah, there's many people that have these abilities.
It's really cool to think about getting a preview and having that aha moment years later, where it all comes full circle and you're just, whoa, right? That to me is a synchronistic event.
Yes.
That would indicate, I love all this kind of woo-woo talk too, but it indicates to me that you're on the right path. For me, I believe in synchronicity, showing you signposts, meaning, okay, this is a moment in life where you've synced up with a purpose.
I feel that. Yes, I feel, and not only an alignment, but it's been a milestone in my life. Is that exact synchronous moment when I connected the dots? That was a milestone for me. I feel very grateful and fortunate for that, because I feel fortunate or lucky in that sense, because those are the experiences we all want to have in life. And I had that moment of finally connecting the dots of what was going on during that time. And now it feels like it makes sense. So it's been profound in my life.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I love the paranormal and and the esoteric and the high strange and the weird and the mystical. This is what I'm talking about here. Everyone has such a different experience with phenomena, and they have such a different relationship with the phenomena. And the deep meaning that we derive from our own personal experiences is such a unique experience to the individual, right? Yet shared, you know, globally, yet so specific and unique and different, yet shared. And it's, and
Yes.
no matter how many different people you talk to, everyone's story is the same, but totally different. And it's fucking mind blowing.
Well said.
And
Yes.
that's why I love it. And sure, some people on the outside might be like, oh, you're ascribing meaning to things to, make your life more interesting and, have more magic in your life where none before existed. And it's like, well, yeah, isn't that what we're trying to do here? Isn't that what life is about, to be lived? I just have this phrase in my mind lately for the last 48 hours. It's live more, live better. And it just keeps, it's like some other voice just keeps saying it to me, live more, live better, when I'm just like, oh, I should go sit down and do nothing. And it's like, live more, live better. Right. And
Right.
when it comes to the paranormal or doing research, I get really excited about the idea of like, oh, I'm going to have so much energy. I'm going to read all these books. I'm going to research all this stuff and I'm going to know so much more about this stuff. Right. And it gets me really juiced up. And then I'm like, okay, I got all these other things to do too. But you have these profound moments that you're describing and they alter the course of one's life. And your life
Absolutely.
has been changed from that moment. I want to know the device. If you can remember the specific device it was when you first heard those same voices.
Absolutely. It was my zero gain stall device. It's essentially a custom computer that runs off of an FGPA, which is a field programmable gate array, FPGA, and has DSP chips. So essentially, I can add flavor to an analog device that I'm using or create devices within it, essentially called direct voice. I'm using a mathematical process in a circuit with my field programmable gate array and DSP chips to create voices that derive from this device through an output channel, essentially. So there's no radio, there's no receiver, there's no microphone, there's no outside contamination. And that it was through that direct voice experience, through that device, where it just smacked me. I heard it and I immediately went, wait a minute. Like I was almost like, what year is this? Where am I? Like very quickly, we've all had those deja vu moments. I was like, wait. And then I just had this flood of like hot sick almost. It kind of hit your stomach. You get the goosebumps. I went, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I heard as a teenager. And it just, from that point, I never thought I'd talk about it because it may not make sense to people. And it only makes sense if you're in my shoes, I guess. It's one of those experiences, but it just changed my life. From that moment, it propelled me to, no matter what I did with audio or frequency or the pressure wave, ITC was always involved somewhere in my life.
Wow. And I'm not going to act like I know what everything you said meant when it came to
I'm still learning about it. I'm a student still.
The technical aspect of, the device and the computer. And now, like, as far as your education goes, was this your field of study as well, obviously, or am I making an assumption here?
It is. My background is actually not only in auditory science or audio engineering, also in economics and finance. And what's really interesting, economics taught me a lot. Well, wait a minute. It taught me a lot about ITC because in economics, there's a lot of systems theory. And you train your brain to look at something from all angles, and sometimes from angles that may not have been thought of before. And combining that with a software program called MATLAB, MATLAB, it's a computer science or it's an engineering language that I was using for business calculus and studying finance. Well, that same program also was responsible for writing what's called IIR and FIR filtering, which is what I use for my DSP, which is filtering. I'm sorry, I won't bore you anymore with that. But essentially, my education in business using a software program, also helped me in my audio engineering studies. And also simultaneously, I was using that program while studying audio. So even my business education has contributed to instrumental transcommunication. There are attorneys and lawyers in instrumental transcommunication because of the way they think and the way they can apply their thoughts and theory to how this might work. Everyone needs to get involved in ITC.
Yeah, and the ITC world is no joke. As
No,
far as it's not like there's 14 of you, or like who are I don't want to maybe diehards or like
true.
enthusiasts and true believers.
Mhm.
And there's such a technical aspect, and this is where I love the different to borrow a communist kind of concept, to each their own ability, right?
True.
And when it comes to the paranormal village, it takes all different types of people
Yes.
who excel in different ways and who are excited and thrilled by different specific work. And this is
Yes.
understanding the brains and the skeletons and the nervous system of these devices is not my forte. That's for sure. Um, I'm interested in the transition from, you know, interest, obsession, experience, inquisitiveness into the tinkering phase, right? Where it's, because obviously there's different devices, there's all kinds of devices out there.
Mhm.
And the only reason they exist is because people got very excited, interested, and
Right.
fascinated by
Yes.
the phenomena and had an idea about, well, what if we did this? And then
Yes.
they figured out how to build that damn thing.
Yes.
And that is to the benefit of the rest of us who
Mhm.
get to be like, oh, I get to use all these fun gadgets where
Right.
I'm getting actual communication, I believe, from something and from
Right.
somewhere.
And throughout my career in instrumental transcommunication, I have celebrated other builders probably more so than I have my own equipment because I'm so excited and I love ITC so much. It doesn't matter if it's my device or someone else's. I just want to use it, experience this phenomena, and share this to the world or to other people to say there is something here. There is something going on here. And for a lot of my live shows, I will use other people's equipment combined with my own. Sometimes theirs alone, sometimes mine, and it just elicits the same excitement every time. It's something that doesn't get old, whether I'm using someone else's device or mine. It's just that excitement is always there, and there are so many amazing devices that are available to use. There's literally at almost any price range, no matter what your budget, you can get into researching instrumental transcommunication. You don't have to be an audio engineer. You can be a florist. You can be a food delivery person. It doesn't matter. Everyone can get involved in this. There's something to learn and a subjective experience for you waiting for you with instrumental transcommunication.
Yeah. And I think you have to be somewhat willing at the very least to do quote unquote post production.
Mm, yeah.
Because I mean, you can hear responses in the moment, but sometimes these things are just happening so fast and you're in the
Yes.
moment, and that it's upon review, really. And that's what I mean by post production is going back and listening and, recording the session. And you don't have to do that. I mean, you can just have a
Right.
session for the sake of having a session
Sure.
without the review part, but you might miss some stuff. Um,
Right.
what was the first idea you had about a change or a nuance to a specific device that you thought to yourself, I have to make this?
Interesting question. And I haven't thought about that device until this moment. A device that dithers. There's a process in audio engineering where, when changing bit depth, we use a dithering process. And what essentially that means is inducing a blue or violet noise, into the production process that not only smooths out, in this case, the music that I was working on, but provides a very, I'd have to show you the graph, but provides almost a perfect environment for this communication to come through, just blue or violet noise by itself. It's very subtle if you listen to it, very much so compared to white noise or red noise or brown noise that you might hear. So the first device that had come to my mind was, I want to make something that basically you input and combines with the dithering process, this natural dithering process of including blue and violet noise, and then listening to it through an output channel. Now, the input could be a varying signal. It could be another form of noise. It could be audio that you might have, but there is magic in that blue or violet noise. So that was something I started with. And then that led me to something else. I didn't quite finish that because it was like, oh, this leads me to this. So that's what I mean is you have to be willing to stop and change direction while you're using your imagination with this field, because it's not black and white. I'm not designing an interface or a converter for an audio file, because if that was the case, I'd use the best equipment, get the best measurements, and send it out the door. In this case, sometimes we want the opposite of what an audio file or a critical listening person might want to create this noise. So sometimes in this situation, the dithering process interested me the most. This was 2001 or two. But again, that led me to something else. So that's how this works. You start on one thing and you wind up on something else.
And I mean, that is the beauty of the creation process for me. And I think what it speaks to, and many people have said this in the past, and it's true, it's all about sitting down and starting the thing. And
it is.
There's so many times where I'll sit down to write, okay, do an hour, even though you got nothing in your head to write about. Just start writing. And then 40 minutes later, it's like, oh my goodness, wow, this could be something. And you never would have got there if you didn't start on the other thing, or just start in general. And I think that's all the creation process is giving it a chance to be something. And where it ends up, detach yourself from outcome and, see what happens, be open, have, that plasticity of thinking, and, be mobile, and, be ready to move, and listen to the call to move. Right. Because I think that's what you're talking about. And paying attention to the call and answering it is, I could only imagine in this field, as far as, I mean, it blows my mind, the technical aspect of this. And, because I feel like there's a million different things that you could do or tinker with on a device. And it blows my mind to even try to, conceive of how, because a lot of us are out in the field like, oh, it's a radio and it scans backwards. Hey, that's, but there's all these devices, and there's so much more behind the shell of the device itself that's going on.
There is. And the builders and creators throughout this field and through the decades have put so much thought and care into their devices. And, a lot of them have been electrical engineers, and they've put their decades of experience into a device, maybe towards the end of their career. And some of them have even created new methods of busing audio or creating audio within the radio. I mean, have done things that are revolutionary that maybe a radio manufacturer may not want for the average consumer wanting to just listen to an FM or AM station, but have revolutionized or changed this communication. And also created a new technology or a byproduct of something amazing. So it's the potential in this field is endless. There is no box to think inside of here. It's infinite, if you will. I guess infinite is the right word. There's infinite possibilities.
It's funny to think about. There's when discussing these spirit boxes or ITC boxes, there is no box to be inside of when you're thinking about it. Right.
How ironic. Yes, because it's true. We are using a box or device, and yet what we're communicating with or engaging in is quite the opposite of what we're holding. We're literally, anything but inside the box. We are drawing outside of the lines and then some, so yeah. Oh, it's been incredible.
You gave me this great idea. And if I win the Mega Millions tonight, which I could probably check right now to see if I won. So I think it's about 12:45 East Coast time,
Right.
a.m.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
So the numbers should be out. If I win the Mega Millions, I'm going to buy a radio station, and I'm going to pay you how much ever money it takes to just have a 24-hour ITC signal broadcast on a radio station where that's all it is. It's for people to tune into on their radio, on like whatever radio they're using. And we can change it. Different time slots can be different devices, I suppose. But
Right.
how cool would that be to have a paranormal radio station like that, like an ITC radio, just
I,
24
I,
hours a day?
I not only love that, I support that. I'm on board. I'm working towards that.
You're
I'm
already
doing
doing it, I guess, is basically my
a
point.
little, well,
Like, I want
not
to
to
pay
the,
you to do
yeah,
what you're already doing. I mean, you're doing a 6-hour live stream,
yes,
somewhat regularly.
I am. I could do more and I could do more hours. And my goal is to get to that point, to get to a 24-hour spot. Now, I do want to give credit where credit's due. There is someone in the field, Keith J. Clark of Paranormal, that runs a 24-hour block segment, sometimes 48 hours, but he will run visual and audio ITC. And he's been in the field for many decades.
Oh,
Please
wow.
check out Paranormal, by the way. Amazing, incredible research and chronicling of instrumental transcommunication. But he is doing that. I believe he's on a break right now. So there is something out there for someone on YouTube streaming, if you will, not a radio station. But I'm on board with your radio station idea. I like that.
So we all have to move to, you know what? We'll all move to, Hat Tip to Art Bell. We'll all go to Pahrump, Nevada,
Yes.
and we'll, set up shop there. The it's it's fascinating to me to try to even wrap my brain around many of the concepts of ITC. And one of them, and I think it's the big one for most people, is but why? But how? It's like, but
Yes.
how does this? But why would this work? And I was wondering if you could shed some light on the theory from someone, like you're in this field, you're entrenched, you've been in for a while, you're one of the leaders in creating, new thoughts, devices,
Thank you.
and
You're
you're
talking to me.
yeah, well, I'm talking to you,
Thank you.
Joshua, now.
Thank you.
And you're quick to point out the other people in the field.
Oh,
It's it's not just a you thing.
oh, no, I'm one
Right?
puzzle piece.
Exactly. So I'm curious why why does Joshua Sean think that this is a good idea and that it has actual, let's say, evidence-based merit for investigations or for trying to establish communication with whatever it is?
I think it's a good idea as in to be very general, is it gives us an insight into ourselves, into humanity, our abilities, our ability to perceive things, maybe with our five senses and maybe things we're perceiving outside of our five senses. I think it gives us insight into the real phrase when you hear someone say, oh, life is frequency and vibration, raise your vibes, man, or something like that. There is truth to that. We are literally frequency and vibration. And when we study those very raw concepts into themselves, we're inquiring, well, we perceive frequency and vibration, but what else perceives it? What else is understanding or can be aware of the same frequency and vibration that we are as humans and can use it to communicate? In other words, there is the theory that this frequency and vibration of the communication we're hearing from the others proliferates or exists in all dimensions. So that this very same frequency that's in our dimension is also in another higher dimension. And maybe that they're able to use those frequencies to communicate with us. So digressing back, I really feel it's just an understanding about us as humans why we're here. And maybe we'll lead insight into something else. Maybe ITC is just a little piece of the puzzle that's going to eventually lead to something else to help us understand. But I definitely feel there's already enough evidence. And I'm seeing some of my scientific colleagues that have never considered this before are now finally looking at this going, wow, there's something here. There's something here. Now, whether they're going to spend their time researching it with me or not is depending on, if they're getting paid or not, or what their job entails. But I really believe it's to help us better understand ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, it's well put. And I love this idea because, speaking to that specifically in a way where if anyone has been in the field or been doing an experiment at home using ITC and had a goosebump moment,
Yeah.
That it transcends just a mechanical movement. It starts to encapsulate spirit, emotion, thought, physical feelings. All the senses now are engaged, and emotionally, you're transported to a place.
And one of the electrical engineers that I look up to, he's no longer with us, Ron Ricketts. He created the mini box, and it's a ghost box device, one of my personal favorites. Something he stated in his literature is that these devices that he's building and that we're all building, he said, maybe let's just think about this for a second. Maybe they're just training wheels. We really don't need these devices, but they kind of help activate our senses or our awareness of the spiritual or the ether. And that at a certain point, he didn't need to use his devices anymore. So he was able to sit at home and elicit this communication or receive this and engage in this without his devices and essentially work with his own body and his own abilities. So it's funny that you bring that up, that you could be sitting at home not using these devices and yet have these experiences. And so many people tie the devices we build to having a profound experience of some kind and then continuing to have those profound experiences without the equipment around.
Wow. I love this idea that they're training wheels.
That was his theory, not mine, but it was just kind of a playful theory, but that was his direct experience. He shared that after a while, he put the device down. He was instructed to, and then it just happened naturally.
And you know what? I feel like, just to expand on that thought a little bit, I feel like the training wheels they serve a dual purpose. They're training wheels for the experimenter, but they're also training wheels for the outside world to believe what the experimenter is actually experiencing and establishing communication. Because oftentimes, I mean, there are, more than a few psychics I know that if they tell me something, I believe them. Mm-hmm. And, if they tell me they're talking to a spirit guide of mine, I understand that they're receiving a message. I don't need it to come through a device. Right?
Correct.
And
I believe that as well.
So I think for the skeptically minded person out there, mm-hmm. these devices that are being used can also be training wheels for them.
Yes.
For their just general belief to maybe get expanded.
I love the way you said that. And many people in my life who have been skeptics, who maybe have known psychics or have been to a psychic, where, although again, I can't prove anything, and the only thing I know is I know nothing, I still show them my field of research to say, wait a minute, there is something legitimate to what many psychic people experience. Let me show you through audio, something you can actually hear in the moment or later. And then you kind of make the connection. Wow, I just heard my nickname when I was 6 years old from my great uncle that you would have never known come through the radio. Now I can kind of understand maybe not completely, but how a psychic, I'm not in their shoes, but how a psychic might receive the same information naturally without any devices, So ITC does open that world for some skeptics who go, whoa, there's something to this. And wow, the psychic I talked to, last year, did you validate something and they were correct, and maybe there's something to this, and then you see people's heads explode connecting the dots, and you just stand there and you're going,
Yeah.
wow, it's I've seen a lot of heads explode over the years.
It's a beautiful moment. And
Yes.
let's take one more quick break here, throwing a couple ads here to keep the lights on. Just a reminder, patreon.com/Ryan Singer, $3 a month. I mean, that's nothing. Thanks to the new patrons, by the way. Love that you joined up over there. And I've got some Bigfoot prints that Matthew Jackson took on his phone from our Florida trip. So go check that out. Yeah, so we'll be right back with Joshua Sean. We're talking about ITC. We're talking about, just, spiritual, becoming spiritual beings through the mechanics of software and, audio visual communication devices that connect us to something that is unseen. I mean, what else is there?
Well said. Oh, the if I had to consider that, what else is there? I oh, one second. Are we on break? I'm sorry.
No, we're back now. Oh
Okay.
no, we're back. If you had to
Okay.
consider, what
Okay.
else is there?
There is so much more to consider. I don't even know where to start because there are so many areas and angles to look at in instrumental transcommunication, not only through different fields of study, but through different subjective perceptions. Just talking to someone else who perceives ITC, you learn something new. Every single person will perceive it somewhat differently. Similar to what you said earlier, we share a collective experience, but it's also very unique to us. In terms of what else is there, Ryan, just to lay it on the line, I believe ITC can help increase for many what they call spiritual communication, or increasing communication to our higher selves, or hearing the background noise in our own brain. Some people believe we're communicating with hearing our own thoughts, which I believe, Ryan, it's a party line. I believe we're hearing from spirit. I believe we're hearing from thoughts from our own brain. I believe we're talking to our higher selves. I believe some people think we're addressing the Akashic records. Some people believe that we're talking to the ascended masters or maybe people in other dimensions. So when you ask me what else is there, I almost have to respond back with what else isn't there. In other words, there's just everything left. I don't even feel like we're at the infancy. I feel like we're just coming online with ITC of what it can possibly do. But I ultimately believe it will help us better understand ourselves and very possibly even unlock the abilities we all have to communicate and receive this communication without these devices. And also understand and retrieve knowledge that we may have forgotten about ourselves, about the stars, about the universe, our existence, and everything else. There's everything left. There really is.
This was the forward to your book, man. I mean, first of all, we two things. That's the forward to the book. Second thing, that's the name of your new podcast, ITC Party Line, and it's.
I hope it's perceived the way I would want it to be perceived.
Yeah, I mean,
Party
it's a
line?
it's a beautiful idea, and it's a beautiful way that you said it. The This is what I love too. Uh, this stuff is very personal, and like you're talking about, like the perception, the way each different person perceives it in their own way. But it's also, you're talking about some big ideas. And when it comes to the world of the paranormal and the supernatural, to me, it's all big ideas.
Yes.
At the heart, at the end of the day, if they say in certain things that if you follow the money, you'll find the answer, right? But I think
yes.
if you pull the thread of any paranormal or high strange idea, if you pull that thread big or far enough or hard enough, you get to a really big idea, and
Yes.
it's transformative in a human existence kind of way. And I know in the last handful of years, it's become more accepted to have these conversations, and
Mhm.
more people are open to the ideas of the paranormal. And I think that's a very good thing. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I think it's because there's an underlying current of people realize, without even maybe realizing it, that these are really big ideas, that we're not alone in the universe, and that death isn't real. And if those two things are true, which I believe it's very likely they are, everything about the way we live our lives completely transforms. And ITC is at the forefront, I would argue, in a very realistic way, in a material way, to show people part of that, and at least give them a glimpse of, check this out, like we were saying, like the big
Right.
head explodes moments, right?
Right. It it really does. And when you say front lines, I didn't consider it that way before, but you're absolutely right, because we're really bringing to the table anyone in instrumental transcommunication, including yourself and other people researching the paranormal. We're trying to bring that evidence forward so you can see it with your eyes, you can hear it with your ears. So for those that really just need the tangible proof, it's basically saying, here's something. We don't quite know what's going on, but it's something. And we want you to hear it so that you don't feel alone. You know that you're okay, or you know that there's something else out there, something intelligent that knows your name, that knows your nicknames, that knows what you had for lunch 2 weeks ago. You know, and it it brings comfort to people and does open their eyes and their minds to say, oh wow, maybe I will start exploring myself spiritually, or maybe I'll start reading books about the science behind it. Or you'd be surprised which direction people go, but it really does. I like how you said that we're on the front lines of introducing the phenomena of our universe to people.
Yeah, I mean, because we can trace how far. Is there like an inception date, or like an origin uh in the ITC community? Is there like a well accepted idea of the origin story of ITC?
There is, and in fact, probably the most famous and more modern timestamp in history is Frederick Jurgensen and Dr. Konstantin Radova. And they worked in the 1950s and 60s with things like direct radio voice in EVP capture, where they would use an interfrequency on the radio to try and capture these voices, or run a recording machine to try and capture these voices. So I would say that modern, probably the 1950s, that era is probably the most modern timestamp in recent history that people are most familiar with. Now, we could go back further with Nikola Tesla. There are people back in the 18 and 1700s that were using technology of their time to try and conduct this. But the most knowledge and history we have is of this last century.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, as I say, that's nothing to shake a stick at when we're talking about 70 years.
Right.
And I think, what was it, 47 was Roswell.
Right.
So that's 77 years. We're putting ITC at 70. Because without ITC devices, without ghost boxes, you know, without digital recorders, we've got dowsing rods and psychics, and maybe flashlights that can turn on and off, which I've seen happen, and it's
Right.
and
Sure.
it's bonkers when
Yeah.
it happens. But when it comes to, outside of video cameras and photos, which ITC can be video,
Of
uh,
course. Mhm.
but outside of like showing someone a video of a ghost, or a picture of Bigfoot, or something like that,
Mhm.
which still is scrutinized,
Of course. Yeah.
it has to be, ITC has to be, like, let's say you're playing Mike Tyson's Punch Out. ITC is Mike Tyson. It's, and
Yeah.
and I love dowsing rods, but dowsing rods are, the the one, the one with the first guy you fight on the way up. He's like, you know, it's more advanced. It is more convincing and I guess more fulfilling for people to see or hear results and evidence from a device who aren't willing to believe in phenomena in general.
Right. And even with the success of the dowsing rods and the fact they do work, the instrumental transcommunication provides such amazing potential to hear with your own ears, even if we subjectively differ in what we hear, but knowing that voices are coming at you that aren't supposed to be there, that at some point are calling your name or calling some type of intelligence. So it's just one of those things where people hear this for the first time and it expands their mind and they keep coming back to it. It's, I don't want to say it's an addiction, but it's almost this thirst or quest for knowledge just begins in people and you can see it. And ITC allows for that to happen is why, while I still encourage people to trust their psychics and if they have someone they know who's talented and things like this and trust their dowsing rods, ITC can just bring that tangible evidence that nothing else really can. There's pros and cons to everything, but ITC brings the goods. We bring the bill of sale. We've got the receipts.
Yeah, for sure. And it's it can be overwhelming evidence.
Yeah.
And I think, everybody can get chilled up and get goosebumps. And then a week or two later, they're like, maybe my blood sugar was low.
Sure.
But
It happens,
if the box says, a nick, like you said, like the nickname that nobody knows from
right.
when they're a kid. And then in conjunction with something else. I love those sessions. And, specifically, and it's not always easy to do in the moment when having sessions
No.
to avoid yes, no questions
Right.
and try to stay away from the questions that have like short one syllable answers,
Right.
because the noises or whatever. But when those moments happen where something very specific is said and it like, oh my gosh, it is, there was this place in Iowa, and we were doing a session after a comedy show at this haunted place. And I was like, oh, what do I was starving and there was pizza downstairs and been down there for like an hour and a half. And I'm like, oh my God, I hope there's some pizza left. I'm like, what is it that I'm waiting to eat? And then the ghost box just goes, pizza. And I was just like, I mean,
right.
What else do you need? I didn't sleep well because it came from the ghost box was in the middle of my bed that I'd be sleeping on later that night. But
right.
But it's overwhelming
Mm-hmm.
evidence. And when I forget about it, I can go back and I can watch the tape and be reminded.
It's incredible because you had that experience, and maybe a skeptic might say, "Oh, well, you heard pizza, out off of a commercial." And then you remind, because sometimes skeptics have lazy answers. You go, "Okay, well, let's break down the mathematical probability that the word pizza would have been said in this exact moment." And when you actually look at the math and you start to finish, you're just like, "Oh my gosh, there's no way this could have aligned at that moment." And then you hear your childhood nickname. That's it. We're done. The math is done. Like, statistically speaking, that's not going to happen. And then you get the curse words that they throw in, which, there's the silver lining with that, because it's like, that's not going to be on the radio. Some of the most creative curse words, might I add, are not going to be on the radio. So,
and I'm here for that, by the way. And I love that. I love curse words. I was thinking about that today. Just these moments where you're just like, what is, like when a skeptic will say to a person that their experience is bogus, that what they experience, that they're misunderstanding what they really experienced, even though they weren't there, and they say it was this, not that. You don't have any proof that that's what happened. This is what happened to you. And the irony there is they're telling you what happened and they have no proof whatsoever that their whatever their explanation happened. And they're mad at you for not providing evidence or proof or the burden of proof. Meanwhile, they are providing zero proof or evidence for their alternative explanation. And meanwhile, you do have proof and evidence. You have your firsthand eyewitness account of the experience, which is a lot more than, you know what, it was probably ball lightning. It's like, do you even know what ball lightning is?
Right.
So it is interesting that the skeptic will quickly throw out things that have absolutely no evidence or proof as an alternative and not expect to be held to the same standard that they are holding someone else to.
You just hit the nail on the head. It's we both have to, both the skeptic and the operator, or the ITC believer, if you will, need to hold ourselves to the same standards, if you will. So yeah, what is the probability of ball lightning in this area at this time of year? Let's look at the data science of this. You can't just throw things out there, just like we can't just throw things out there. Or if we do, we say we don't know the source or origin. But there is that level of credibility that we need also. And there's very good skeptics that help this field. Believe me, skeptics have pushed this field. Okay. Skeptics have helped push this field because we have a desire to prove them wrong. We have a desire to show this is here, this exists. But it's true, though, the skeptics, we do need to see a little bit more data supporting their hypothesis or theory as well, to help both of us. This isn't a competition, but really to help enlighten both sides, because I still learn from skeptics. Skeptics learn from me. So it's to help both of us in this research process.
100%. And I'll be the first one to admit that if I'm not challenged on anything,
right,
ever, I will get a little bit late. I'll get a little bit lazy or lax.
Right.
There was and sometimes, I mean, I can think of a perfect example of where I debunked one of the most incredible things I thought I'd ever gotten. We were in Florida. I thought I had Bigfoot on camera.
Wow.
Moving like very subtly and slowly, stepping to the side behind a tree. Okay. I was like, you see the shoulder. I'm like, I was losing my mind, right? When I first saw this, I'm like, I've got Sasquatch on camera. And then within 5 minutes, I debunked my own video and I was crestfallen, but I was so glad that I didn't put that out there. And then 30 minutes later, someone's like, it's this, you're misinterpreting a branch that's very close, and blah, blah, blah. So, but if luckily I was able to catch myself on that one, but we do need people to make sure that we are, because we want it to be irrefutable. We want it to be, we want it to just be gold, don't we?
It absolutely. And we want it to be so irrefutable that we can walk into a room of scientists that have their nose in the air and say, well, bam, here it is. This can't be debunked at all. And that is, I mean, I suppose that's one of the goals, but I think it's also the journey of uncovering what this is and why we're on this journey. But the fact that you were able to do that so soon shows a level of responsibility with your research and your investigation, where you're able to review your evidence objectively and say, wait a minute, let me review this and make sure that I've got this right. Because that is, not only is that a big claim, but like you said, you want that to be irrefutable. And I would like to see more of that, just in general, of people kind of putting their own evidence in check, if you will, before it's claimed to be something that maybe it's not. And that goes for me too, as well. I have to keep myself in check of what I present live to people and what I don't, or explain what it is. So there is that level of responsibility with that.
Yeah. And, I think it's doing the good work, right? And you're doing the good work, and, you've got a set of standards, and you come from, an educational background. You know what you're talking about. You know what the devices do. Now, who's using devices, you're never, well, I'm curious, we'll end on this.
Mhm.
This has been a great chat. I can't wait to do this
Oh,
again.
it's my
Um,
honor. Thank you for having me.
oh, it's my
So
pleasure.
grateful.
And I'm I'm curious if there's been a session where you're like, you know what? I know I tell people that the only thing I know is I don't know, but I'm pretty sure I know who this is. You gotta have it. I mean, I'd be surprised if there wasn't one situation like that. If you had to bet on one, if you had to put all of your money on one of them.
Yes, I've shared this with my live audience. My cousin Marie lost her fiance to brain cancer. And she asked to conduct these sessions. And I had to explain that I have no idea who we're talking to. I can't promise anything. Please, I can just present the equipment. You need to be the judge. So for a few years after Brian's passing, that was his name, everything in my heart, everything in my intuition, everything vibrated that this was Brian we were talking to, because he wasn't able to speak right before he passed. And when he got to the other side, being a musician and being in the audio engineering field, he, might I say, without any proof, that he was able to easily grasp the idea of how to communicate with us here through these devices. And for the next few years, everything told me that was Brian, her fiance. Everything told her that. There was emotional. We were crying. He would say private things that he would tell her in private to show it was him. And although we don't know if we're being tricked, we don't know who's doing this. We don't know if it's just someone observing our lives, pretending to be this guy, Brian. Everything told me, just because of the full sentence communication, the sound of his voice. Those were the sessions that told me that this is real. We're communicating with our loved ones. Again, I can't prove this, but those were the sessions that just were undeniable to me.
Wow. I mean, that's a beautiful story.
To this day, we're still reaching out to him. Yeah.
Yeah. And even if it is what I would call a kind stranger, right? An entity, an intelligence of some kind, providing, using, interdimensional empathy and sympathy, and providing comfort to people for no reason other than it can, I suppose. I mean, I guess that's as far as like being tricked goes, that's an option. It's not like, you've been talking to, or Brian's been coming through for 2 or 3 years, and then all of a sudden one day he's like, oh, and by the way, I need you to do something for me. And
Right.
then ask some
Exactly.
nefarious favor or something, right?
Please send me $30 million. Please go to your bank and this is the routing number, right?
Oh, I wish I hadn't been a victim of that kind of fraud. I wish I could tell you that I did not have my checking account drained about 5 years ago.
We're all hopeful.
Well, I mean, that's a really beautiful story. And I think it's also one of those things where it doesn't matter if people believe it.
Ryan, ITC I have found is very healing for people. Even if we don't know the source, like you were stating, or if we're being tricked in a very empathetic, compassionate way, some people listen to music, some people golf, some people sew, some people find healing in ITC, in hearing the voices of their loved ones. And even though I can't say, yes, this is them 100%, sometimes just hearing that and knowing that we don't know where it's coming from is comforting. There's something else in that void. There's something else in that darkness and that blackness that all the poets over the centuries have written about. There's something else there. Don't be afraid. So it provides that healing for some people. And I've watched it change people's lives, I mean, for the better. So it's just been a profound experience. And my cousin Marie it's changed her life. She didn't know about it before this. And now she doesn't feel the loss or the magnitude of loss. Even though I can't prove it's Brian, she just feels better. There's some more closure there. So maybe it's, for being tricked, it's just a wonderful gift somehow, that if that is the case.
Yeah, for sure. Even if it's our collective conscious as human
Right.
beings fearing death in
Right.
at such a magnitude that we've created a spirit world of our own design that's not
Right.
really there. I mean, even so, that's a magnificent achievement, and it shows the power of the mind.
Yes. Well
Um,
stated. That
yeah.
perfectly stated.
Well, this has been great.
It has.
You
Thank
can
you.
find Joshua's work at Zero GITC on Facebook and on YouTube. Those are the two recommended spots to go check out. Oh my gosh, what a fun chat! Can't wait to do this again.
Yes. I'm looking
Is there
forward to it.
anything else you want to? Is there anything else you want to plug or leave everybody with before we sign off here?
No, you know what? I would like to encourage people, if you're new to instrumental transcommunication or new to ITC, give my page a chance or some of the others in the field and keep an open mind because there are some brilliant minds designing some brilliant equipment. And you might find something of interest personal to you to start with your research. So just check out a lot of the different builders in ITC and support the builders because we're outnumbered by the scientific community. So just give us a chance and support us if you can.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Love it. Love it. And hey, everybody, thanks for listening through your audio device or watching and listening. We appreciate it. And let us know if any voices were heard or picked up during this conversation. We'd love to, obviously be made aware of that. I wouldn't be surprised,
Oh, never
if,
surprised.
if that happened. So, yeah. And Joshua, thanks again. This has been great and looking
Thank
forward
you,
to
Ryan.
the next time.
Absolutely. I will see you soon. Thank you so much. It's been a tremendous opportunity. Thank you.
My pleasure.